Take a look at the shirt you're wearing right now. It looks harmless. Maybe it costs $10, maybe $50, maybe you bought it months ago and never thought about it again. But check the label. If it says polyester, nylon, or acrylic, part of what you're wearing is plastic. And every time some synthetic clothes are worn, washed, and dried, tiny fibers can break away. They're so small, you may never see them. Some enter wastewater, some end up in soil, rivers, and oceans. Others can become airborne. And this isn't a tiny side effect. Researchers estimate that hundreds of thousands of tons of microplastic fibers from textiles can enter the marine environment globally every year. But that's only one part of the story, because before your shirt reached your closet, it already used resources and created pollution. And after you throw it away, its story may continue for decades. So how did something as ordinary as clothing become such a massive environmental problem? To understand that, we have to start with one idea. Clothes weren't always this disposable. For most of history, clothes were expensive to make. People repaired them, reused them, passed them down, and wore them for years. But modern fashion changed that relationship. New styles started appearing faster, prices dropped, shopping moved online, and clothing slowly changed from something we kept into something we constantly replaced. Between 2000 and 2015, global clothing production doubled, while the average period garments were used fell significantly. This is the basic engine behind fast fashion. Make more clothes, make them quickly, sell them cheaply, replace the trend, then repeat. And if a shirt is cheap enough, throwing it away doesn't feel like a big decision. But making cheap clothes at enormous scale creates a problem. You need enormous amounts of material. And one material became incredibly useful for doing that: plastic. When most people hear the word plastic, they imagine bottles, bags, packaging, or straws. They don't imagine a hoodie. But synthetic fibers such as polyester and nylon are plastic-based materials, and synthetic fibers now make up a major share of textiles. UNEP has estimated that roughly 60% of material made into clothing is plastic. Why? Because synthetic fibers are useful. They're lightweight, they're strong, they're flexible, and importantly, they can be cheap to produce. That's great for making huge quantities of affordable clothing. But plastic has one obvious problem. It doesn't simply disappear. And with clothing, you don't even have to throw it away before it starts shedding plastic. You just have to wash it. Imagine zooming into one polyester shirt until individual fibers look like ropes. Inside a washing machine, those fibers bend, rub, twist, and scrape against one another. Some tiny fragments break loose. These fragments are known as microfibers. And when they come from synthetic material, they're a form of microplastic. Microplastics are generally defined as plastic particles smaller than 5 millimeters. Some are much, much smaller. The amount released from a garment varies enormously depending on the fabric, how it was made, its age, the washing conditions, and many other factors. So there isn't one magic number that applies to every shirt, but the overall pathway is well established. Synthetic textiles shed microplastic fibers during their life cycle, including during washing and wearing. Then you drain the washing machine, and the fibers leave with the water. Which raises an obvious question: where do they go? The water from your washing machine usually travels into a wastewater system. Modern treatment plants can capture a large share of microplastics, but not all of them. And capturing the particles doesn't necessarily make the problem disappear. Many of the captured fibers become concentrated in sewage sludge, which in some places is later applied to agricultural land. Other fibers can remain in treated wastewater and enter rivers or other aquatic environments. And in places without adequate wastewater treatment, the pathway can be even more direct. So imagine the journey: a shirt, a washing machine, a drain, a treatment plant, a river, the ocean. And now multiply that by billions of garments being washed around the world. Estimates cited by the European Environment Agency suggest roughly 200,000 to 500,000 tons of textile microplastics enter the marine environment globally each year. But then, the story becomes even stranger, because plastic particles aren't only being found in the environment, they're being found in us. Scientists have detected plastic particles in human samples, including blood. One 2022 study analyzed blood from 22 healthy volunteers and detected several common plastic polymers in the samples. Other research has reported microplastics in placental tissue as well. But this is where we need to be careful. Finding plastic particles inside the human body does not prove that your polyester shirt put them there. Humans are exposed to microplastics from many possible sources: food, water, air, packaging, household dust, textiles, and the wider environment. And scientists are still working out what long-term exposure actually means for human health. The World Health Organization has repeatedly highlighted major gaps in the evidence and the need for more research. So the scientifically accurate conclusion isn't your shirt is poisoning you. It's something more uncomfortable. Plastic pollution has become widespread enough that tiny plastic particles are now being detected both around us and inside human bodies, while we are still trying to understand the consequences. And microplastics aren't even fashion's only problem. Imagine we somehow made a shirt that released zero microplastics. Problem solved? Not even close. Clothing has to be produced. Fibers have to be grown or manufactured. Fabric has to be processed. It may be dyed, finished, cut, sewn, packaged, transported, stored, washed, and eventually discarded. Each stage can require energy, water, chemicals, land, or raw materials. UNEP estimates that the textile industry is responsible for roughly 2 to 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions and uses about 215 trillion liters of water per year. And there is no perfect fiber. Synthetic materials can rely on fossil resources and shed persistent plastic fibers. Natural materials can require land, water, chemicals, and processing. So simply replacing every polyester shirt with another material doesn't automatically fix the system. The deeper problem is scale. We're making enormous amounts of clothing and we're throwing enormous amounts away. When you throw a shirt into a bin, it disappears from your life, but it doesn't disappear from Earth. Worldwide, an estimated 92 million tons of textile waste are generated every year. That's roughly equivalent to a garbage truck full of textiles being landfilled or incinerated every second. Some unwanted clothes are resold, some are donated, some are exported, some are recycled, some are burned, and some simply become waste somewhere else. Used clothing from wealthier markets can travel thousands of kilometers before being sorted again. The European Environment Agency has found that large quantities of used textiles exported from Europe end up in Africa and Asia, where some are reused or recycled, while unsuitable material can ultimately be dumped or burned. In northern Chile, piles of discarded clothing have accumulated around the Atacama region. A shirt can be purchased on one continent, worn a handful of times, exported across an ocean, rejected again, and finally become waste thousands of kilometers from the person who originally bought it. We didn't eliminate the waste, we moved it. At this point, the solution sounds obvious. Take old clothes, turn them into new clothes, problem solved. Except clothing is surprisingly difficult to recycle. Look closely at a single garment. The main fabric may be cotton mixed with polyester. The collar may contain another fiber. The thread may be synthetic. There may be elastic, a zipper, buttons, prints, coatings, and dyes. Different materials are tightly combined into one product, and recycling systems often need those materials separated. The European Environment Agency notes that fiber blends and non-removable accessories make textile recycling more difficult, and that almost one-third of textile waste may be unsuitable for fiber-to-fiber recycling under current conditions. Globally, only a tiny share of the material used for clothing is recycled back into new clothing. So recycling matters, but recycling alone cannot keep up with a system designed to produce and discard clothes this quickly. So what are you supposed to do? Never buy clothes again? No. The goal isn't to feel guilty every time you buy a t-shirt. The biggest changes also require better design, cleaner production, improved waste systems, stronger recycling technology, and action from the companies producing clothing at massive scale. But at an individual level, there is one surprisingly powerful idea. Keep your clothes longer. Buy something because you actually want to wear it. Wear it again. Repair it when possible. Buy secondhand when it makes sense. Don't replace a perfectly good shirt just because a new trend appeared online. And wash clothes according to need rather than automatically after every brief use. Environmental agencies consistently identify longer garment lifetimes, reuse, repair, reduced fast fashion consumption, and better recycling as important ways to reduce textile impacts. Because every extra year that a useful piece of clothing stays useful delays the moment when another product has to replace it. So, go back to the shirt we started with. At first it looked simple. fabric, thread, a label, a price tag, but behind that shirt is a global system. Raw materials, factories, energy, water, plastic fibers, washing machines, wastewater, ships, sorting centers, landfills, and sometimes an ocean between the person who buys the clothing and the place where it eventually becomes waste. The price printed on the tag tells you what the shirt costs you. It doesn't tell you what the shirt costs to make, use, and eventually throw away. And maybe the most sustainable piece of clothing isn't the newest one. Maybe it's the one that's already hanging in your closet.